My subject of today's topic is actually social sustainability. But to give you a brief background about our firm, uh, we are based in New York. We have offices in Washington as well as in LA, and groups supporting us in Bangalore as well as in Cordoba in Argentina. We do have a global practice and a very diverse practice. Like many of us, we also design a lot of tall buildings all over the world. Some of these buildings are under construction. The one on the left-hand side is in Istanbul. The one in the middle actually is I'm designing right now near Shanghai, not too far from here. And to many people's surprise, by the way, the building on the left is the building we did almost 15 years ago in Shanghai, which is built here. It's a headquarters building for ICBC, but you can't find the building anymore because all the surrounding area is so much taller and so much denser that it is quite interesting. With that as a background of the firm, and talking a little bit further in terms of our practice, we also design, by the way, I'm one of those few architects who also design bridges, do enormous scale master planning work as well. With that as a background, some fundamental facts. For the last 2 days, you have been hearing a lot about density, vertical growth, and creating human scale throughout all these projects. Having said that, some fundamental facts are that we have 29% land and 70% water on this Mother Earth. Our Earth's population is about 7.2 billion and is growing at a rate of 74 million per year, which is quite a number, by the way. Currently there are about 5 people live in the cities or urban environment. By 2030, it is expected that every 6 out of 10 would live in the urban environment. And by 2050, about 7 out of 10 would be living in urban environment. In China, you may know, or some of you may not know, but they have intensified this urbanization program to a much higher level, which is quite remarkable. Having said that, by the way, one of the references I want to make is the Fujian Tulao near Nanjing. These were the settlements in China built between 12th century and 20th century. And what is remarkable about this is, although low scale, they embraced density and preserved the land around. I mean, it's just amazingly beautiful project, bit more socialistic for some of us, but nevertheless, it's what about utilizing the land very brilliantly, I thought. And then when you look at the Middle Ages, like Siena, if you look at the city of Siena, it's very dense, but the fingers of landscapings go through the entire city. And the image on the right-hand side, which is San Gimignano, some people claim it is one of the earliest example of taller buildings. Yeah, I mean, we can go far beyond into the history, but nevertheless, and this was driven by merchants, wealthy merchants of San Gimignano. And it is a remarkable place which embraced density and preserved the landscape around. To mention about the human scale, by the way, we as architects and engineers and designers have been grappling with this issue as we are building in terms of human scale and what is right for us and what makes sense. The image of Leonardo da Vinci is very famous, of 1490. He grappled with these issues. Corbusier created this notion of man and modular in 1945. So we have been trying to deal with this issue, and it is a subjective issue. And that's why I called social sustainability for this whole topic. Recently I was in Venice, and I I was so tempted to show these images, not because it has any necessarily direct relationship, but there is a direct relationship at the same time. This enormous boat, when it is docked right in Venice, it sort of looks like a monster, you know. I mean, it is like, it was just incredible how it overwhelmed me, you know. And then in Venice, when you walk through the city's streets, some of them are actually 5 feet in width. And I was walking through these, and the one on the left and the one on the right, the distinction between the two, by the way, is very simple. In one case, the daylight penetrated the street, even though it's 5 feet. And in the other case, it didn't. And when you walk through a street without the daylight or sunlight, it does make you uncomfortable. I can vouch for that because I was doing a project in Manhattan on Wall Street, and I had a project office in Wall Street, and it used to make me so uncomfortable in Wall Street because the sunlight doesn't penetrate many of the streets, you know, in that area. Anyway, the other series of slides, again in Venice, because I was just there, as I mentioned earlier. In architecture, at least in the past, there was the use of decorations. In today's world, all in the rational world of architects of today, to use the word decoration is almost like using a 4-letter word, and it is inconsistent because it's not rational thinking. But having said that, it did serve its purpose, and the purpose was to break down the scale of these buildings and make us comfortable. That's why many of us still like to walk and visit the older buildings. That architecture makes us comfortable. But we can't do that anymore because we have moved on, and our time has changed, and the way we build has changed. These are some of the slides of a well-known architect, Italian architect of Carlo Scarpa, who was a 20th century architect. And this is a cemetery that he designed, by the way, not too from Venice. But what is interesting about this is that single tree growing out of a wall momentarily makes you comfortable. Why is it so? Is it because we still have that animal instinct that we are still carrying that makes us comfortable when we are around green? And the one on the right-hand side, by the way, this happened to be a cemetery, and it was designed for a couple. And so he created his windows, 2 interlocking circles, and the story is a long one and a very interesting one of passion and romance and all the good things. But what is interesting is that this little person there, not little person, a person sits next to it to read a book in the middle of a cemetery because he, I think it is he, was very comfortable because of the daylight situation. That brings me to the 20th century. This is New York and Chicago. The earlier buildings, the tall buildings, Lou Sullivan and Daniel Burnham. Actually, my office is, by the way, literally walking distance from this Daniel Burnham's building in the middle. In those days, they actually considered the buildings, some of them thought that the building should be treated like human beings, and therefore they should be proportioned to mimic the human body. And especially Lou Sullivan used to think that way. And therefore he created his notions of tripartite ideas and so on and so forth. But essentially they did figure out a way to break down the scale of these buildings so that we would be comfortable because they would relate more to our scale. I'm not suggesting we should be doing that today because our world is different. That brings me to current cities. The 2 images on the left are already developed, New York and Shanghai. I can talk about density in Shanghai. It is the most impressive city when it comes to embracing density. But then there are cities which are still either growing or parts of the cities which are emerging. China has 5-tier cities, by the way, total of 5 tiers of various cities. Shanghai is number 1. And I'm showing an image of Nantong area, which is considered a tier 5 city. And then I'm showing a northern part of Mumbai, which is growing at a rapid growth. And the point to make is simply is that while we are developing all of this stuff, perhaps some thought should be given to social sustainability and relating to human scale. I do practice out of New York, and I'm sort of sorry to say that we in the United States are sort of one of the biggest abusers and wasteful people in the world. I'm showing 2 images. One image on the left is Las Vegas. Talk about disrespect for land. I mean, there is no better image than describing that. And the one on the right happens to be Los Angeles. I was there just a few weeks ago, and the city tapers off so fast and spreads so fast at such a low scale that it is a bit scary, that such a development could occur, and it is occurring right now, and so I find it a bit stressful sometimes when I drive through these places. And then there are cities like Dubai. I mean, this is an interesting image. It's a juxtaposition of sort of 2 modern worlds crashing, one trying to mimic the old history, and one trying to be in the 21st century. And they clash with each other dramatically, not necessarily in a bad way, but they're trying to deal with the issues in their own way to create a comfort level for all of us, And then this is Hong Kong. This is the Tin Fu Court. And there are a lot of these developments in Hong Kong which have occurred. And it embraces density, but probably makes discomfort for the people who live there. I was talking to president of AIA Hong Kong chapter yesterday, Christine, who some of you may know, and she was sort of giving me explanation for all of that. But it still didn't convince me that it was a right choice in terms of how the same density could be achieved in a little better way, Having said that, I'm creating a set of criteria. I'm going to show you a case study. And the case study happens to be in a project in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh. I'm the first one to tell you, when we were given this commission, I was absolutely petrified to even accept the commission for 2 simple reasons. One is a desert environment, and 2 is how would you embrace density in this part of the world and still deal with many of the things that I was talking about earlier. And I was really petrified, and I didn't know whether we should even accept this commission. But having said that, statistics speaks for itself, by the way. It's on a small area of about 1.6 million gross square meters. This pension fund called Riyadh Investment Group decided to build about 5 million square meters in this very condensed land, which was encouraging. That means they were saying that density is good. The master plan was created by a Copenhagen firm of Henning Larsen. I would say brilliantly done. I worked very closely with them, and quite brilliant. In this environment of no topography, they did create a topography by creating the green space, which is called the Wadi, which is about 7 meters deep, deeper than the rest of the place, creating first the topographic interest in this place, which is nothing but sand, And then embrace the idea of a density. And density that I thought, when I started to work on the project, would not work. I thought it would be a disaster. It was so dense. But in that bright, sunny environment in Saudi Arabia, where the temperatures do go to 120 degrees during the summer, it works, and it works brilliantly. I mean, I'm the first one to tell you that when I'm there, and that little bit of shade does make you comfortable, even for a few seconds, because the temperature variation may be just few degrees, but it's enough to give you that comfort. And so they created that. They created artificial topography, they created density. There are many architects, by the way, working on these projects. Many of them are extremely known to all of you, from Foster to, to name just a few, Gensler to, you name it, Banish, and they're all working. We were fortunate to be given a commission to design 12 buildings. So I'll go through them and to show you what we try to do here within the constraints, and then embracing density and still trying to create human scale and spaces that would benefit us. And the first thing is a mixed-use building. The entire project is mixed use, so you can work, you can live, you can raise your families, you can raise your children, you can go to school, you can do everything within this small community of 5 million square meters, which is not a small thing. Parking is mostly below grade, not mostly, it's all below grade. The artificial topography that was created by Wadi, which is 6 to 7 meters deep, is strictly for pedestrian use. Although the temperatures in Riyadh do go high, in the evening hours they do drop dramatically. And to my surprise, during the winter time, you really need a coat or a jacket in Riyadh, which is hard to believe, but it is so. It gets a bit cold, as well. So the point to make is simply that the parking is below grade, mixed use. We did residential as well as office as well as institutional buildings in different mixes. So there are 4 or 5 mixes we tried in different buildings. One case is just residential. In one case, residential office side by side, small scale, low scale, residential on top, residential on the side, residential. We tried everything, and we have designed all of that and built. All of these buildings are almost built, by the way. And the reason for these mixes of various kinds was so that we can support the economic groups in various categories. So younger families or younger unmarried or married young couples could live on the top of the buildings with the smaller apartments, while apartments which are closer to the ground, bigger scale, could be used by families with kids. And then there are, of course, some middle size for more affluent and more settled families. So we tried to mix all of these various residential typologies. Smallest buildings were these 2 residential buildings, 5 stories, retail below, parking below, using sandstone, limestone, which is very common to Riyadh, and then creating facades which broke down the scales. But they are not decorative surfaces, by the way. They are strictly functional in all its aspects. The landscape element, which is the wadi, which is strictly for pedestrians, no cars. Cars are only on the roads, so which created this sort of private as well as public environments within the community. In case of another parcel, we designed residential along that pedestrian walkway with a tower pushed back. I shouldn't even call this a tower. It's a 30-story building, which is relative to Shanghai. It's a tiny little building, but nevertheless, it allowed us to relate the human scale to the buildings. Again, the wadi. Along with this same parcel, by the way, we had an opportunity to design a mosque. Talk about a mosque. I have no idea about the religion of Islam. I had to learn very quickly but we did it. And in this particular case, by the way, the point to make is very simply looking at various components, it gave us a perfect opportunity to use decorative surfaces for filtered daylight. And we studied this to death, in terms of how do we do it, what's the significance, what's the symbolism, and on, and created this building with decorative surfaces which filters the daylight. It's not in stone, by the way. The building is in marble, but the material, the grill itself is a double grill made with metal. We intentionally did the opposite. The building itself is white marble from, I believe it is from Macedonia, which is interesting. We were also asked to design a museum, not a small museum, by the way. The total area is bigger than the Metropolitan Museum in New York. We created this building with textures of surfaces. It's a double wall. And the intention was to constantly relate to the human scale, admit the daylight in a very appropriate manner, and yet control it in this harsh environment. This entire neighborhood has a monorail going through, connecting all these buildings. So in this museum, by the way, the monorail literally goes through the building. So we had to incorporate the station within the museum. So you can imagine the complexity of circulation and, between private and public and all of that stuff. But nevertheless, we sort of stayed with it and resolved. It's going to go in construction pretty soon, by the way. The bids are in. 2 buildings that we designed, these are already built, has a big retail base at the bottom. Similarly, some of the other buildings has connections to the adjoining building. The point to make is, by the way, that because of the temperature variations, we did create these pedestrian bridges based on the master plan that is created. So one would pass through this building during the afternoon harsh climatic weather, and that was great. Another project we did there was this is the residential and office buildings side by side. The section I'm showing intentionally to show you the mix of residential, how they got stacked on top of one another, how you created 2 different spaces of different kinds, creating landscape components, and showing now one specific component of the building as to how the sun shading devices as well as privacy screens were used in a decorative manner, but yet totally functional. I'm very proud of this particular facade. This is, it will surprise you. It's actually a marble laminated on a glass. So it's an IGU unit. Cricursa out of Spain is manufacturing this, or fabricating this, I should say. So as a result of that, during the daytime, the building would glow internally without really doing a light. And at nighttime, it would reverse itself and glow with an internal light outside. So no artificial lighting or decorating the buildings in any manner. So it's very, very cleverly done. It's under construction. I've seen the mock-ups in Germany, and it looks wonderful. So these are some of the details of that facade. And finally, the conclusion is essentially is that I think density is critical, but bringing the human scale and components which will all make us comfortable is as critical to think about. These are subjective issues. These are not issues that you can measure. It requires probably a lot of more research, but nevertheless, these are very critical issues: the aesthetics, creating spaces, details, materiality, dealing with climate, culture, and on and on and on and on. And that brings me some slides to ask you a question for creating a dialogue. So as we move forward, and when the building scale are going to change to this scale, may not be all over, but the building in Jeddah, and the one in Dubai. Thank you. My time is up, so I'll just conclude by saying that how do we deal with these issues of social sustainability. And here is an image in Los Angeles by an artist called Burden, who created an image of metropolis, and I was just totally amazed by the visual chaos. And I thought, I said, what does that mean, you know? And I'm raising that as a question. And these are some of the drawings of famous artists from New York by Lewis Woods. And he created his vision for future cities. And my question is, when we move into the space age, what does it all mean for all of us? So thank you so much.